Warning, doctors may be hazardous to your health.
Is hand washing something that is routinely done by healthcare professionals in a hospital? No.
I'm one of 5 million nurses, and within 60 days of being a nurse, I saw a patient killed by a medication error.
Medical mistakes are at frightening levels.
Well, medical errors represent the third leading cause of death in the United States after heart disease and cancer.
It can happen to anyone.
And I pick up the phone and, my mom's assistant saying, your mom's not breathing, your mom's not breathing.
I was thinking to myself, I was supposed to take my little girl home, and now my little girl's going to the morgue.
Just what do you need to know to protect yourself? Fox News reporting, beware, danger at the doctor. Here's Bill Hemmer.
When we visit the hospital, we hope to be cured, not get sicker or possibly worse. As a society, we're well aware of the big threats to our health, heart disease, cancer, and so on. But what if one of the biggest threats is the world of medicine itself? This hour, we're looking at medical errors. How much danger are we in? How are they being managed, and what can we personally do to prevent them? And a warning, some of the things you will see in this report may disturb you. We begin now in Cleveland, Ohio.
I thought she was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Friends called them Barbie and Ken. Kelly Buck and Chris Jerry were college sweethearts who married in 1991 and started a family. First came Nate, then Catherine Elizabeth, and then, in 2004, Emily. But there was a problem with Emily.
Emily was actually born with what's called a sacrococcygeal teratoma.
That's an external tumor at the base of the tailbone.
And the pediatric surgeon, he said, Chris, don't worry about this. He said, this is very benign. We can remove it.
Emily bounced back from the surgery, but then, at 18 months,
she was starting to grab her side every once in a while and wince in pain.
They took Emily for an MRI. When no one came out for a long time, Chris, who, as it happens, worked for a medical imaging company, feared the worst.
All of a sudden, the radiologist, as well as Emily's surgeon, came out, told us we should probably sit down.
Emily had a grapefruit-sized mass in her abdomen. She would need chemotherapy immediately.
Why did this happen? Why is this, Emily's second major affliction, and she's only been in this world for a year and a half?
Are you having fun, Emily?
For half a year, Emily got monthly treatments at Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital in Cleveland. However, when Emily did not seem to suffer from the usual side effect of the therapy, her oncology team worried she was not responding. She went for a second MRI.
And lo and behold, in their words, not mine, a miracle had occurred. We were informed that not only did the tumor completely disappear, there wasn't even any residual scar tissue in her little abdomen remaining.
The Jerry family was looking forward to their future together.
We were elated, absolutely elated. I wanted to take the kids to Disney World. I wanted to continue to grow as a family.
To play it safe, the doctors recommended one more round of chemotherapy to ensure there were no cancer cells left. Chris and Kelly agreed, and on February 24, 2006, Emily's second birthday, she went in for her final treatment.
By now, word had traveled throughout the whole facility. All the clinicians had heard about this beautiful, angelic-looking little girl being cured of this horrible affliction. People are bringing her cookies and birthday cards and things of that nature.
The treatment went well for the first 2 days. On the third and final day, siblings Nate and Catherine were getting ready for a celebration when their little sister would return.
They had painted welcome home signs and were just so elated and could not wait. I arrived at the hospital about 15 minutes after they had started the IV. That was probably the only time that I was late before they started the IV. And when I walked to Emily's treatment room on the second floor, I remember this in slow motion. Although it happened very quickly. My wife was holding Emily in her arms, and Emily was completely unconscious. And my wife had just this horrible look of fear in her eyes. And I said, "What's going on?" She shook her head. And that moment just seemed is burned into my brain.
No one could figure out why Emily was unconscious. She was taken to the pediatric intensive care unit. Her brain had started to swell.
And that's the part of this that bothers me the most. I can't imagine the amount of pain that little Emily had to be going through.
For 3 days, Emily showed no sign of brain activity. Chris and Kelly had to make the most painful decision possible. They took their little girl off life support.
What was the most difficult part in all of this is my baby girl was cured of this horrible affliction. And now she was taken away from us. I was thinking to myself, I was supposed to take my little girl home, and now my little girl's going to the morgue. Our SUV happened to be parked on the top floor of the parking garage. And I thought to myself, maybe I should just take a flying leap off this parking garage and go and join my little girl.
But Chris realized he could not give up. He could not let his daughter die and have it end at that. He decided to investigate into the cause of Emily's death.
I was thinking to myself, this is not rocket science here, guys. It had to be something with her IV mixture. I dug through the trash and found the partially full bag. And I asked the nurse, I said, please call down for an administrator in charge. I'd like to give this to them.
It turned out a pharmaceutical technician, Catherine Dudash, had created the mixture that was put into an IV compounding bag. The hospital's pharmacist, Eric Kropp, was busy that day and okayed the mixture without properly checking it first.
I made the assumption, the wrong one, that of course a registered pharmacist is going to prepare any and all IV medications. And as I began researching this, I found out that's not the case.
Emily had been given a bag with a 23.4% concentration of sodium chloride, 26 times the amount required. That's what killed his daughter.
For many, many years, this is something I felt a lot of guilt about. It was one of the first times I wasn't there when the nurses started the IV, and this was done in a compounding bag. I would have insisted that nursing call down to pharmacy and say, hey, why is this in a compounding bag? And I was 15 minutes late.
In the end, the hospital apologized for the medical error. The pharmacist, Eric Kropp, who signed off on the IV solution, he was fired and his license revoked. He was tried for involuntary manslaughter and received a sentence of 6 months in jail, 400 hours of community service, and 3 years probation. The pharmaceutical technician, Catherine Dudash, was also fired but did not receive any prison time. The Jerry family received a marginal settlement from the hospital. That's because Chris refused to sign a full non-disclosure agreement. He wanted to keep Emily's story alive. However, Kelly Jerry disagreed with her husband's decision. This helped lead to one last casualty from the original mistake. Their marriage ended in divorce in June 2009.
I really think that that's one of the things that led to the demise of our relationship. Her attitude was, what are you going to do, Chris, to change things? Emily's gone. There's nothing we can do except move on as a family. But what was burning in the back of my mind was, how many other people's babies and children are going to die due to preventable medical error?
You having fun, sweetie pie?
I didn't feel like it was optional.
Later, we'll show how Chris Jerry fought to make sure this never happened to anyone else. Emily's story is shocking, but when we return, we'll talk to a doctor who claims that such stories are shockingly common. Medical errors come in all shapes and sizes. They can be as dramatic as amputating the wrong limb, or as mundane as misreading a prescription. In recent years, research into the subject suggests the problem is widespread and deadly.
Medical errors collectively represent the third leading cause of death in the United States after heart disease and cancer. Third.
Dr. Martin Macri is a surgeon at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. He also sees patients at Sibley, an affiliated hospital in Washington, D.C. He's the author of Unaccountable, which looks at flaws in our healthcare system, and is a leading advocate in the fight against medical errors.
One day I walked in and the team had prepared the wrong side of the body, and we came to do our so-called checklist, and the nurse said, "Hey, wait a minute, it says here right side, but you guys have prepared the left side."
It could have been a disaster. The question is, how many such mistakes are not caught in time? Macri believes more transparency is part of the solution.
I think it's important for us to talk as doctors openly and honestly about these near misses. Talk to doctors, talk to nurses, talk to any family member or person out there that has had an interface with the healthcare system. Almost every person has a story.
This is going to be very tight, okay?
I discovered that what I really wanted to be was a nurse because all of my jobs have been geared toward taking care of people.
One person with a story is Janie Garner. She was a Navy corpsman and held several private sector jobs before studying to be a nurse. She now has nearly a decade's worth of experience as a nurse. Fox News correspondent Laura Ingalls spoke to her in St. Louis.
Within 60 days of being a nurse, I saw a patient killed by a medication error.
Tell me what happened. That must have been such a shock to you. You're fresh out of school, you're on the job, excited for your new career.
Worse than that, I discovered the medical error.
Janie saw on a patient's chart that he'd been given a large dose of the wrong medication.
I looked and I was like, this patient was supposed to have gotten 90 units of Lantus like half an hour ago.
Right.
I don't think they got Lantus. And very obviously what happened was the nurse drew up 90 units of Novolog instead of 90 units of Lantus and injected the patient with it, and 45 minutes later we were doing CPR on him.
I can hear in your voice this is still really upsetting for you.
Oh yeah. We killed somebody's dad.
According to Dr. Macri, what Nurse Garner witnessed is not that unusual. In fact, his most recent research, published in the British Medical Journal in May of 2016, suggests the number of deaths due to medical error are higher than previously thought.
The old number we've been citing from a 1999 report of 100,000 deaths per year is outdated and underappreciated the magnitude of the problem. The real number is at least 200,000, probably 251,000 in our own analysis.
Yeah, it was very startling.
Dr. Michael Daniel is the co-author of that report.
When you just take a number like 250,000 on its own, you don't really have a good idea of what that means. But then when you start comparing it to the number of deaths due to cancer, due to heart disease, due to respiratory diseases, then you realize that this is a really large burden, and that was scary.
You stand by that number?
Absolutely. Look, these are estimates. If someone dies of heart disease, we don't do an autopsy on every single patient. The doctor fills out a death certificate, and that's how we populate our country's national health statistics.
95% of the diagnoses on the death certificates that go into making statistics are guesses or assumes that the doctor who issued the death certificate, treated the patient, did everything correct.
Dr. Michael Baden is a forensic pathologist and has worked on some of the most historic high-profile cases, such as the assassinations of JFK, Dr. Martin Luther King, and the O.J. Simpson murder case. According to Dr. Baden, death certificates do not accurately record a medical error.
The death certificate only relies on what the treating physician thought the cause of death was, and it makes the development of accurate statistics as to cause of death very difficult, with wide margins for error.
But what can be done to get more accurate statistics and help prevent more errors?
Autopsies are a prime way of revealing A, medical errors, B, if the treatment was successful or not successful, and of what else could have been done that would have been beneficial to the patient. So there's a tremendous amount to be learned from the autopsy as far as whether or not the mistakes were made, absolutely, and how to prevent those mistakes.
We should have more autopsies.
Gerard Giannoli is a doctor in Louisiana who specializes in neurotology and skull-based surgery.
Back in the 1970s, we had a 50% autopsy rate at hospitals. Currently, it's less than 5%. For us to have a 100% autopsy rate in this country, all it would take is one autopsy for every pathologist out there once a week, and we'd have a 100% autopsy rate in this country.
The cost and the fear of punitive measures keep many doctors and hospitals from performing autopsies.
The average autopsy is about $1,000, and it's not paid for by health insurance, obviously, and the hospitals don't want to pay for it, and the question is who's going to pay for it.
So more autopsies would give us more accurate information, in your view.
Absolutely.
I do know if you improve the number of autopsies that are done, it helps identify preventable errors and preventable reasons that people get sick and sometimes die.
Although Dr. Giannoli questions the accuracy of Dr. Macri's study, he admits that medical errors occur.
It can happen. It certainly does happen. It's a very serious problem. I think it's a very exaggerated number. It does not reflect my experience or the experience of all the physicians I've spoken with.
If you talk to any doctor or patient, they will tell you that they have seen close calls, near misses, or real preventable harm that happens that should not happen.
Coming up, you'll meet a doctor who's had more than enough experience dealing with the horrors of medical mishaps from a patient's point of view.
When I was a young professor, my wife at that time she was 33 years old, and she suddenly got pain in her right foot.
Dr. Frederick Southwick had been a star athlete on both the football field and wrestling mat at Yale University in the 1960s. Now a professor of medicine at the University of Florida. He knows full well the repercussions of medical errors after his first wife, Mary, sought help for her foot pain.
She initially sought care from a neurologist, followed by an internist, and they didn't come up with the proper diagnosis. She developed phlebitis, which is clots in her leg, and was admitted to the hospital and got insufficient blood thinner.
That sent her into a downward spiral, an embolism, a heart attack, kidney failure, and a 10% chance of survival.
Miraculously, the cardiologist who finally took care of her decided to give her corticosteroids. And once the steroids started, all the symptoms and signs reversed, and she actually walked out of the hospital. It was really a miracle that she survived.
As a result of his wife's brush with death, Fred Southwick's career changed direction.
I was chief of infectious disease for a long time. I decided that I needed to change my career. So I actually took a fellowship at Harvard Business School, and I studied errors through the business world, because businesses deal with quality. The problem with healthcare has been it didn't matter what the quality, you still got paid. So I did that studies, and I wrote the book, Critically Ill. From there, I helped develop projects in quality and safety in our hospital system, and I also created an online course. I've tried to disseminate the knowledge that we all need to have in order to improve healthcare.
During a game of tennis in 1995, Southwick tore his Achilles tendon.
I had an operative repair, and that repair seemed to go okay. However, I did notice that my foot afterwards turned blue when I went in the water and felt a little funny, but I was told it was just a little bit of nerve damage from the surgery. I didn't think anything of it.
July 2012, 17 years after his tennis injury, Southwick was out paddleboarding.
I got what I thought was a severe calf pill, but over the month it did not get better, and my foot turned white, and immediately sought medical attention. I'd lost all of the circulation below my knee, and yet the circulation every other part of my body was normal. And the vascular surgeons were dumbfounded. Well, after the dust settled, the only choice was to do a above-the-knee amputation. And as I was recovering, I said, what happened to my left leg that didn't happen to my right? The only thing was that Achilles tendon surgery. When I went back to the OR report, I found that they had placed a tourniquet above my knee for over 2.5 hours. And that tourniquet had damaged the arteries below my knee, and I had been living off 1 instead of 3 vessels for all those years, and that final vessel then clotted off, and that explained the loss of my leg. So it was actually a surgical error that caused the loss of my leg.
Through all of this, he gained a unique understanding of the true nature of medical errors.
No one intended to hurt me. What it's really done for me is motivated me further. The other thing it's done is because I still care for patients, I show patients what happened to me, and they really bond with me. So in one way, it's been a terrible loss. In another way, I've had some gains in my ability to interact with patients and to counsel patients. And also, I think it gives me more credibility in the patient safety world because I have been on both sides of the fence.
Just ahead, meet a Marine corporal who got lost in the VA's medical system. So far, we've seen how patients can become victims of botched medical procedures and just rank negligence. But sometimes, the whole system can fail, fatally so.
We love Jason and we miss him.
He was always this positive, funny person.
We sat down with Linda and Marvin Simkuski at their home in Stevens Point, Wisconsin to talk about their son, Jason.
He had a lot of friends, and he was always known to be the class clown. Always brought a smile on your face and always made you laugh in everything he tried to do.
When Jason turned 19, he joined the Marines.
He was a guy that wanted to be a tough guy. He was in infantry. He gave it 110% on everything he did, and he was super proud to be in the military.
He loved it. Being very active and a good athlete, he always took it to the top.
After completing his full term as a Marine, Jason returned home to Stevens Point. He got married and had a daughter. At some point, he began struggling with an addiction to painkillers. Linda and Marvin suspect their son's problems may be connected to a severe head injury he suffered while stationed in Hawaii.
After that point, he seemed to change.
For 5 years, Jason sought treatment to battle his addiction in the VA hospital in Tomah, Wisconsin, and as an outpatient at their satellite clinics.
When he came home, I was just surprised to see how many different meds that Jason was put on. There were so many meds that he didn't even know how to keep track of what to take. I mean, because can you imagine yourself taking one med for something, for depression or anxiety, and now you have somebody that's taking a handful of them and throwing them all in a cocktail.
By August of 2014, Jason hit rock bottom and wanted to get his life back on track. He voluntarily checked himself into the VA hospital.
He was to the point where he'd take something in the morning to get him up, going, and then at night he'd have to take something to knock him out. And he wasn't happy with it. His family wasn't happy with that. And he knew he needed to go in and get help, and he trusted them.
He was in physically good shape, everything before all this. Well, after they start putting him on all these meds, he went from 185 to like 253. This was a guy that used to carry people on humps in the military because they couldn't make it. He went from that to a person that was just struggling with his life.
Jason entered the facility with hope that his doctors would adjust his medication so he could live a normal life. Instead, his condition got worse. In a cry for help, he texted his father saying, "I'm worse off now than before I came in."
He's like, "Dad, you got to help me." He said, "I can't take this anymore." That was a tough day, and then I made some calls to doctors and things like that at the time.
And then the next following day or 2 days later, they scheduled a meeting.
And the doctor turned around and pointed at me and she said, "Mr. Simkuski, you caused me a lot of problems here." And that was the first thing she said. And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She goes, "Yeah, you may know how to build houses and pound nails, but you don't know anything about taking care of your son."
On August 30th, just days after that meeting, Marvin, his wife, and his daughter went to visit Jason.
He was just mumbling and holding his head. And then when they questioned and went to the desk, they said, "Well, he's just got a migraine. We gave him something. He'll be good in an hour or two." That was it. So they hung around a little longer, and then he just kind of waved them on to leave. Came home and we got a call probably about 4 or 5 hours later saying, "He's not breathing, but we're gonna take him somewhere. We're gonna get the helicopter in, we're gonna get him somewhere." So we took off from here, and it's usually about an hour and 15 minutes drive. And I told my husband, I said, "They're not calling us, they're not calling us." We called them back, and it seemed like it took them a while to get on the phone to us, and then they're like, "No, just come here to the building." And I said to him, he's gone. We just knew it.
The morning that he died, he called me the night before and said, "Dad, make sure you bring my truck. I'm coming home for my daughter's birthday." He was going to leave that Monday coming up for his daughter's birthday. You know, after he died, we found he had a present in his locker for her. I mean, he had everything all set to come home. So, but he was a good kid.
An autopsy was ordered by the hospital.
We got the call from that area that was handling the autopsy, and they said it's not a migraine. Jason didn't have a stroke. His heart was fine. We just have no answers. He's a healthy 35-year-old male, and we need to do more tests now, which could take a while to see what he passed away from.
The autopsy concluded that Jason died from, quote, mixed drug toxicity. That included antipsychotics, tranquilizers, muscle relaxants, and the painkiller tramadol.
There was probably 3 or 4 doctors that wrote out different prescriptions for him. He was there till, that was roughly a 2-week period. My wife and I didn't know all the meds that he was on from this last doctor until after he passed away. After he died, we found out there was, what, 14 meds? We have to start standing up to do something here to stop this problem and turn it around.
Medical mistakes can happen to anyone, even the rich and the famous. Up next, hear how a standard procedure at an outpatient clinic ended comedian Joan Rivers' life. We've seen the damage that medical mistakes can do. The truth is, medical disasters can happen to anyone, anywhere, even to the rich and famous.
You look around, you realize the amount of people that you employ, and that if, God forbid, I'm out of work, this whole little pyramid goes out of work. And you suddenly realize, I'm an industry.
This is a beautiful neighborhood in Manhattan that happens to be the epicenter of healthcare in the world. It's called Bedpan Alley.
This is the facility where she came.
This is the last street that Joan Rivers ever walked on in her life.
As a lawyer practicing in New York, Fox News legal analyst Peter Johnson Jr. has had plenty of experience suing and defending doctors in hospitals. We asked him to review public records surrounding the death of Joan Rivers.
There are so many hospitals and outpatient surgical centers, like Yorkville Endoscopy, within a 20-mile radius.
And she came here one day because her throat was sore.
Her throat was sore, and she came here for an endoscopy. They were going to drop a camera down her throat into her digestive system to find out what was going on. But what happened is she wound up getting 3 procedures, 2 which she never consented to.
The night before her appointment, in August 2014, Joan called her daughter Melissa in California.
She went in for a routine procedure that hundreds of thousands of people go in every year for. It has nothing to do with celebrity, it has nothing to do with money, it has nothing to do with status.
Here, she was supposed to get light sedation, but there's a question about how much sedation she got and how many procedures that she actually received. Joan Rivers' throat seized up during one of the procedures, and it shut down her airway.
And when my phone rang that early in the morning, I was just like, oh God, why are they calling me this early? Because I was in Los Angeles. And I pick up the phone and, you know, my mom's assistant saying, your mom's not breathing. Your mom stopped breathing. You go cold, just absolute cold.
Melissa was told that her mother was taken to a hospital where she was put on life support. 7 days after she walked into that outpatient clinic, Joan Rivers was pronounced dead.
Once all the noise surrounding the death and this funeral and all of that stops, that you go, wait a minute, why? Why?
Melissa Rivers filed a lawsuit in New York State against Yorkville Endoscopy LLC and the assorted doctors and corporate entities associated with the clinic.
She came here for a simple procedure. Who was in that room with her that day?
In the room was about 5 different doctors. Not all of them were authorized to be there. There was a gastroenterologist, but there was also an ENT doctor, an ear, nose, throat doctor, who didn't have privileges at the facility.
How is it possible that a doctor not authorized could be in that room for a procedure like that?
It shouldn't have been authorized. It shouldn't have been allowed.
The complaint was very hard to read. Very, very hard to read.
The file complaint reads like a medical nightmare. Doctors named include Dr. Lawrence B. Cohen, the medical director of the Yorkville Endoscopy, and according to allegation 204, he took out a cell phone and took photos of Joan Rivers while under sedation.
Selfies. You can't legislate good judgment or morality. I wish we could, but you can't.
Dr. Gwen Corvin, an ear, nose, and throat specialist, had, quote, no right to perform a transnasal laryngoscopy on Joan Rivers. And Dr. Renuka Bankula, an anesthesiologist who, quote, failed to demand or request a crash cart be brought into the procedure room.
Because those are the drugs that would have made a difference for my mom.
Outpatient facilities, do they have the same rules and regulations? Do they have the same standards as a regular hospital?
They don't really, and it's murky as to what standards that they have.
An investigation revealed substantial violations, including discovery that Dr. Corvin did not have any surgical privileges to perform any procedure on anyone inside that clinic. The lawsuit settled with the doctors not contesting the suit's findings.
I feel that's about as close as I'm going to get to accepting responsibility for their behavior.
The financial settlement is sealed, but the dollar amount is believed to be in the tens of millions of dollars. Dr. Cohen, as the clinic's medical director, stepped down, but he and the other doctors are still licensed to practice in New York State. And Melissa tells us further investigation is underway.
The New York State Medical Board is now doing their investigation. So we'll see what comes of that. I have my personal hopes of how that pans out. Everyone's just stop for a second and let's make sure everyone's not only able to walk out of the clinic, but alive coming out of the clinic.
Coming up next, how to take charge of your treatment as a patient. As we've seen, medical errors can be a devastating problem. There are people who are trying to make things better.
There are more places for errors because there are more medications being given than ever in the history of medicine.
Part of the solution is to have patients themselves take charge of their treatment.
We're going to do a procedure, and I'll explain it to you what it is.
Dr. Manny Alvarez, chairman of obstetrics and gynecology at Hackensack University Medical Center, has a checklist for being your own advocate.
Number 1, bring somebody with you to listen, to ask questions, to write things down. If they're giving you medication, ask questions. What is that medication? If they're taking out your blood, you could ask, why is my blood being taken? Make sure the staff follows all hygienic protocols. Can hand washing in a hospital make a difference in transmitting bugs? The answer is 100% yes. Is hand washing something that is routinely done by healthcare professionals in a hospital? No, only 30% of people wash their hands. If you think that you need a second opinion, seek one out.
Good. You okay?
Make sure that you participate in every activity when it comes to patient identification or making sure that if you're having surgery, the surgeon has the proper knowledge.
The patient's name is Jane Smith, S-M-I-T-H.
And consent for the type of operation that you're going to have.
Everybody in agreement? Agreed.
When in doubt, call it out.
Meanwhile, there are many healthcare professionals dealing with the matter of medical errors.
Help! Code blue! Call it code blue!
We traveled to Scottsdale, Arizona to the 18th Annual National Patient Safety Foundation Congress.
We have gotten better, but it's been too slow. And everyone wants these changes to come faster.
Dr. Southwick, whom we met earlier, was one of the many attendees.
So what we do is share our experiences, our best practices, and our expertise with each other so that we can all become smarter and we can all apply what is working in other areas of the country.
We're teaching patient safety in medical schools and nursing schools and other forums to make sure people understand what are the causes of error, how do you design systems to try to prevent error, etc.
Dr. Tejal Gandhi is an associate professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School.
We still have a long way to go, but we have made progress.
Teaching patient safety is one thing, but Dr. Gandhi feels in order to create safer hospitals, the medical culture must also change.
We're working on creating a culture of safety where everybody is comfortable speaking up and know that they won't be blamed or punished for speaking up, but actually will be listened to.
You know, you want your nurse to speak up when they see something that doesn't look right. And it's our job as surgeons to empower them to say, look, if you see something that doesn't look right, say something. I'm capable of making mistakes.
The families you've heard from tonight are also determined to change things. After the death of Marine Jason Simkuski, a Senate investigation showed systematic failures in the VA facility that treated him, and the fallout included the firing of the hospital's chief of staff, Dr. David Houlihan.
Studies have shown that soldiers and veterans use opioid painkillers far more frequently than civilians because their military training and combat lead to far more injuries.
The bipartisan Jason Simkuski Promise Act passed unanimously in the House of Representatives.
The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Lawmakers expected to pass in the Senate soon.
There's guidelines to protect the veterans and servicemen and women on opiates, on making doctors more accountable for their wrongdoing.
We don't want other vets to have to go through this.
Melissa Rivers is determined to pass a Jones Law.
I can now move forward to trying to make a change and try and create some sort of legislation, which, you know, in the best of all possible worlds will be called Jones Law, and be able to lobby for stricter regulation and more oversight to these different clinics.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Surviving Healthcare Today.
After Chris Jerry's 2-year-old daughter Emily died, Jerry began to advocate for a law in Ohio requiring pharmaceutical technicians to receive proper training and certification. Emily's law was passed in 2009. Chris then started the Emily Jerry Foundation. You can go on the website and see which states certify their pharmaceutical technicians.
I've always believed this. One life lost to preventable medical error is too many. And because preventable medical errors are just that, they're preventable, means logically they should have never have happened.
We don't want to create fear. We don't want to create hysteria. We want people to recognize that it's a great profession with doctors trying to do the right thing, but it's a messy system. And unless you take charge of your own care, it could be a very scary proposition.
Hospitals are among the most trusted institutions in our country, but healthcare is as much art as it is science, and mistakes, as you have just seen, do happen. But there is good news. The healthcare industry has recognized that medical errors are a problem, and it's trying to find ways to reduce them as much as humanly possible. That's our program. I'm Bill Hemmer. Thanks for watching.